Welcome to Tanya Outside In, holding chapter 19 in the middle of chapter 19, which is like in the page 48. Um, we're just over halfway down. We'll go back a few lines. So, first word on the line is Shebenefesh. Um, we are we discuss what it means teva. Teva basically is a cop-out word for saying I don't know why it's like that. You say to the nature of a tiger is to eat meat, and the question is why do tigers eat meat and why do cows eat grass? And the answer is that's the nature of a tiger. That's the nature of a cow. A tiger is defined by the fact that it eats meat. A cow is defined by the fact that it eats grass. It doesn't eat grass for a reason or eat meat for a reason. It's the eating meat and the eating grass is an expression of what it is. It's not that it is a function of, it's not that it's a function. You can't say if you were to be able to say it eats grass because, then you would be that because would be defining the animal. So I suppose you could fill in the because. It eats grass because it's a cow. That's the answer. So why does it eat grass? Well, because it's a cow. Cows eat grass, and that's it. That's part of what it is. We spoke about this some time ago, if it's worth going there. I know we're not going to go. Okay, fine. So we're discussing the idea of teva. Yeah, the idea of so the nature of the nefesh lakis is that it just doesn't want to be. It wants to not be. It wants to rip itself away from its place down here, and it wants to be merged into its source above. That's the nature of the candle, the nature of the flame, um, which is comparable to the nature of the nefesh lakis. The nefesh lakis does not want to be here, and it doesn't even want to be up there. It just wants to be back with the Ribbono Shel Olam, merged back in the ultimate fire, the fire of the Ribbono Shel Olam. It just doesn't want to be separate from the Ribbono Shel Olam. Whereas the things of this world, they want to be comfortable down here. They want to be more. It's very simple. The neshama wants to be less, and the goof or whatever you want to call it, the nefesh Bahamis, nefesh Chiyunis wants to be more. Yeah, the ego wants to be more, and the neshama wants to be less. And we said last week that they're both really striving to be godly. Just they've got different ideas of what God is. Um, okay, so Zekla, so now he goes into the Indian of the Sitra Achra. So Zekla b'chol Sitra the Kedusha. This is the klal of everything that comes from the side of holiness. She'eino ela masha nimshach mechochma shnikra kodesh elyon. He's defining for us what kedusha is. Anyone want to throw out a definition of kedusha? It's like one of those words we use all the time. Like we're called an kadosh. It's like one of these embarrassing questions. Like you ask somebody, define for me the word good, and they'll be like, yeah, of course. And then they'll look and they'll be, and then you have to jump in because otherwise they feel really silly. But we don't have the. So anyone want to throw out a definition of the word kedusha?
Above nature.
Sorry,
Separated from.
separate. So yeah, kedusha means separate. Yeah, yeah.
Like um a chelik of God in this world.
So what does that? Okay, but what does that mean?
So anytime there's a place where, I mean, what does that mean? That when there's a when there's a kli that can hold the presence of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that's kedusha. So that's a lot of different things that we build in our lives is a place that's the kli could be a physical thing, it could be a mental thing, but it'd be a voda, but wherever we have, something which is a kli, which is tahor that can take kedusha, then kedusha is it's God's it's not the Shekhinah necessarily, but it kind of, I guess you could also call it that maybe.
So you basically said it in different language that you said it's a kli that's tahor. Yeah, and really what kedusha means is it is a it is a creation. It is a transparent kli, meaning kedusha is the kli. It's a transparent kli that holds the Rebbeinu Shalom. Everything, klipa also holds the Rebbeinu Shalom. Klipa is also a kli. Just the difference between klipa and kedusha is that klipa is opaque or translucent, whatever. Yeah, klipa is opaque, so you don't see the Rebbeinu Shalom. And kedusha is the kli that is transparent, so you do see the Rebbeinu Shalom. You could call that yesh and ayin. You could call that gaiva and another. You could call that bittel and yesh. You could call it all different kinds of things. But the point is that a Sefer Torah is kadosh, yeah? A Sefer Torah is a created entity, but it's transparent, meaning you look at a Sefer Torah and unless your eyes are covered over, you're immediately the creator is brought to mind. When you look at it, like for example, yeah, you see a kid put a cup on the bencher. A bencher's kadosh, yeah. It disturbs you. Don't put a cup or don't put your phone on a bencher. Don't put your phone on a siddur, and you move it off because the siddur, unless you're caught up in funny stuff, but the way it's meant to work is that a siddur is kadosh, meaning it's a kli, it's a created being. Kalim are always created. Yeah, it's a created. It's a definition of a kli. It's created, but it's transparent. That's why we're called an Kadosh. We are a transparent nation, meaning we are the nation in the world that you should look at and think about the Rebbeinu Shalom. You should look at a Yid, and the Rebbeinu Shalom should immediately spring to mind. A Yid is literally a Pesach to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That a tzaddik. Anyway, that's really the definition of a tzaddik. So the experience of a tzaddik, when you go and see the tzaddik, you don't come back talking about how wonderful the tzaddik is and how amazing and how he tied all this together and he was so animated and you could see him going like that and he was really if you're in the presence of a real tzaddik, you walk away and you probably won't have anything to say because you would have had a godly experience. Like what's there to say when you're looking at the Rebbeinu Shalom? What's there to talk about? You might force some kind of conversation, but the experience of the tzaddik is like standing by a pristine window, looking out over a beautiful view. You're not going to come back and turn around to your friend and say, "You can't believe this glass, man. This glass, it was like, I mean, I don't know exactly how thick it was, but it was so clean, and it was like, you could tap on it and it made such a nice noise." You're thinking about the nof on the other side. That's what kedusha is, meaning it's a creation, but it's a creation that does not attract any attention. So that's what the Rebbe calls his bottle. He says like this, Eina says, Eina ela masha nimshach mechochma shenikra kodesh elyon habottle b'metzias. That is bottled b'metzias. I try not to use the word bittul because it has a lot of bad, what's the word? A lot of negative baggage that comes along with it. Yeah, but this is for all intents and purposes. This is what we're talking about. So bittul b'metzias, but or ein so boach or melubish boy ve'ein davar bifnei atzmoi. It's not something unto itself. That is the mindset of the tzaddik, is he sees himself in relation. He doesn't see himself as something unto himself. He exists in context. A Russia is the context. You exist in context of me, says the Russia. The tzaddik says, I exist in context of you. The first question the tzaddik is asking when he sees you is, when the tzaddik looks at you, what what are the four words that are just, I mean, you might have different words, but the four words that I'm thinking of, what are the four words that I'm thinking of that are that when the tzaddik looks at you, he's just thinking four words.
How about how are you?
Yeah, I was thinking, how can I help?
Great.
I was thinking, how can I help? How can I help? What do you need? That's the tzaddik.
Mhm.
He's just completely outward focused. He just exists in context. It's like that's the funny thing is like the reason why the tzaddikim are so lishma. It's like the definition of a tzaddik is lishma. Why? Because he's like, right, what am I going to do in Gan Eden with all this pleasure? I'm not choshev that. Like, I just don't care about my pleasure. Like what that Shalom Laser. Like what kind of incentive is that for me that I'm going to sit there for all eternity experiencing pleasure? He's like, I just want to help. Let me help you. I want to see you having pleasure. And that actually manifests itself in two specific ways. It's both lechem, yeah. It expresses itself in feeding and teaching. That's the tzaddik. The tzaddik is Yosef a tzaddik. He was feeding everyone. The food was coming through him. And the tzaddik also is the one who gives over Torah. That's also lechem. So he's just giving. He just wants to give you.
So, Shmuel, how does that make sense? So you're right. If a tzaddik is always outward focused, then how is Olam Haba about being focused on themselves? How does that make sense then?
The tzaddik is not, the Olam Haba is not in the mind of the tzaddik.
But how does Olam Haba make sense? If it was, how does that? Why? How would that make sense? How is that good for the tzaddik? The tzaddik wouldn't even want that. So how does that make sense?
I don't know. That's
Okay.
a really good
I
question.
mean, the Nefesh HaChaim says because he wants it because that's what Hashem wants. Hashem wants to have a pleasure somehow with you getting Olam Haba, and that's so you're doing it for him.
Okay. I don't
Well,
know. I really have no idea what Olam Haba is.
What
Literally.
Ramatul says it's a Olam Haba is a mitzvah of the tzaddik being a mashpia, not being a mikabel.
So so if you define Olam Haba like that, then he is very interested in Olam Haba.
Right. Then the tzaddik, I don't think the tzaddik is interested in Olam Haba. I agree that the tzaddik isn't looking around, like how do I get to Olam Haba? But why is it shaykh? For somebody, it's not like it doesn't make sense that the reward of because the biggest there it's like the Indian is to be mashpia, basically, like be godly. The person's godly, like and able to, and that's the simcha, or that's the kishmak of Olam Haba. Anyways, that's what Ramatul says somewhere.
I don't know. I really don't know what Olam Haba is. I really have no idea. I'm interested to find out, but I really I've heard lots of stuff and I could say some things, but I don't know. But I do know that we in our generation now, after 5,785 years, I think we are now capable of serving Hashem Lishma Mamash. And to think that we're not, in my opinion, from what I've learned from my Messiah, is the ultimate insult to the Ribono Shel Olam. To say like those words I've heard so many times, Halavai, we could say Halavai, we would have Yirsa Oynesh. I cringe. I just curl up into a little ball on the floor and feel like I want to cry when I hear that. I'm like the Ribono Shel Olam has been manipulating and directing reality for the past 5,785 years to get us to this point now where we are all sick to death of ourselves. We're just desperate to have nothing to do with ourselves anymore. Yeah. And that is the segue into Avodah Lishma. If we can just learn what that means and also learn deeply about the illusion of the self, which is the ultimate prison. See, we speak what we've said many times, the definition of Gehenna. What's that definition of Gehenna? So we
Trapped in your own ego.
Yeah, say it a bit more. Say it more. That's already That's not very foundational. That's like how it looks. Definitionally of Gehenna, as I've understood it, is confusing ends and means to ends. Now that's truly profound. When when somebody mistakes things that are meant to be ends, like his wife and his children, as mean, or Torah and mitzvahs, as means to ends, then that's Gehenna. And if he confuses means to ends, like his car and his business, as ends unto themselves, that's also Gehenna. But really, all of that is just like code fancy stuff for the only option, really, is thinking that Hashem is a means to an end and I'm an end. That's really Gehenna. And the way I understand Gan Eden would be understanding that Hashem is an end and I'm a means to an end. I'm a means to an end. And that is the ultimate simcha. That's called an Eved Hashem. That is the why did we say this? What were we saying?
About a tzaddik being outward focused.
Oh, that's the point. Is when we're talking about getting means to ends and ends confused, which would be like making Shabbos Chol and Chol Shabbos. Shabbos is ends, that's oineg, and Chol is melacha, that's means to an end. When we get that confused, that's why the Rishonim are let out of Gehenna on Shabbos, because that's ends, and they let go of that. The ultimate recognition of reality is understanding that I'm a means to an end, I'm not an end unto myself. That is ultimate freedom. Now you're available to serve the Ribbono Shel Olam. Until then, Hashem was there to serve you. If you're an end unto yourself, then Hashem's there to serve you. The tzaddik has got it completely crystal clear in his mind that he is just a means to an end. And that's where those words come from. How can I help? What do you need? How can I provide for you? Because I'm not here as an end unto myself, because there is only one end. He's the Tachlis, Yisborach. He's the Tachlis. There's only him, Einod Milvadoi. That's being connected to reality. So that's the idea of Kedusha, meaning I'm not an end unto myself. See, the irony is Kedusha is an end unto itself, but I'm not an end unto myself, and therefore I become Kadosh. That's called being bottle. If I'm not an end to myself, and I'm a means to an end, I am bottle to the end that I'm a means to. That's what that means. That's called a tzaddik. That's why we're an Am Kadosh, because we're here to serve the Ribbono Shel Olam, not to be served by the Ribbono Shel Olam. And I think that accounts for the discrepancy in the Loshen in the Derech Hashem and in the Arizal in the Oitzvus Chaim, where they give two different reasons for creation. That in the Oitzvus Chaim, the Arizal says, Rav Chaim Vital, B'Shem the Arizal says that the reason why Hashem was Matzo Ne'et Salim, why he created Ne'et Salim, which is what Am Yisrael are, was so that he could be called Rachum V'Chanun V'Chulei. And in Derech Hashem, the Lashon he says, let's read it to you, isn't it? In Derech Hashem, the Lashon he says is B'Tachlis Abriya Hinei Hatachlis B'Briya Chaya Lehetiv Mituvo Yizbrach Shemo Lezulasoi. The Tachlis in the Bria was to do good. Aderech HaTov Lehetiv, as we all know, yeah? So that's a steerer. Because by the Arizal, he says that he made it Silas because he wanted to be called Hanan V'Rochum. By the Derech Hashem, it says he created Bria because Derech HaTov Lehetiv. He wanted to give to the Zulas. They're two different. That doesn't sound like they're the same thing. So you could touch it in a certain way that they're the same thing, but I think it makes more sense to say that that's the difference between Atzilus and Bria, is that he was Martzel Ne'ed Salim so that he could be called Rochem V'Chanun. But the Bria, and that's the Lashon of the Ramchal, he says, Tachlis B'Bria, the Tachlis in Bria was to give to the other. But you can't say by Atzilus that the Tachlis was to give to another, because in Atzilus, you can't call that another from Hashem. That's a transparent vessel. You can't. That's like the giving is applicable when there's a zulas, another. Otherliness only begins in Bria. Atzilus is there is no otherliness in Atzilus. So it comes out that if you understand it like that, then there's no stira between the Arizal and the Ramchal. The Ramchal is talking about the creation of the world, of Bria down, and the Arizal is talking about the formation of Atzilus. And that's exactly what Hass says to me over and over and over again, that the Arizal speaks always in Moshul. He says the Nimshul is the Ramchal and the Ramak. Why? What's the difference? If you read the Lashon, read of the Kisvei Ari, and it's all sag ag sab mag ab sag ma ben and all the different spheres and ab and ima and the patsufim, and it's all that. I mean, it's Kabbalah Dika Lashonis. That's the Arizal. It's all the Lashon of Kabbalah. Yeah, so that's called the Moshul. The Nimshul is when you go down a lower level. It's funny because we're talking from our perspective, because usually you'd think the opposite. But when we go down a lower level now into the world of Bria, where there's already creation now, and that's the world of the Arizal. And I don't know anything about the Ramak. I've never learned any of the Ramak, although I mean I went through Talmud Devorah. He's bringing it all down into the language of the world. So that's now called the Nimshul. What's the next level after Nimshul? The avoider. That was the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov brought it down to avoider. So the Arizal described the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. What he wrote isn't even called a moshul. That's so it's that the moshul is the Arizal's description of the Arizal's parish on the Zohar Kodesh. Came along the Ramak. Well, the Ramak wasn't. You can't say it because he was a contemporary. He was even a bit before the Arizal. But Alpi Limud, the Ramak and the Ramchal are describing the Kisvei Ari in the Lashon of the Oilamus, not in the Lashon of Atzilus, but in the Lashon of the worlds. You have the created worlds. Don't forget to call Atzilus an Oilam is a shtickle doichik. It's a shem mashua. It's like a borrowed term. It's not really an oilam. We do call it an oilam, but it's like bukushi. It's an oilam. It's not really an oilam compared to bria yitzir and asir. It's not an oilam. It's a completely different thing. Bria yitzir and asir are basically a hemshech of the same process. Atzilus is a completely different. The from Atzilus to bria is an infinite gap compared to from the highest level of Bria, from the lowest level of Atzilus to the highest level of Bria, is infinitely greater than from the highest level of Bria to the lowest level of Asiyah. They're qualitatively different. The one's a Ne'etzal, and then Bria, Yitzir, and Asiyah are Nivruim. Yeah, you can't call Atzilus a Nivra, it's a Ne'etzal. So comes along the Arizal and explains the moshel of the Zohar. Comes along the Ramak and the Ramchal, and they describe the same inyanim in the Lashon of the Oilamas. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov and his chevra, and he describes that in terms of a voida. What do we do? That's the point of the whole thing. That's where it all came down to.
Moshe Shatz says that's the four rivers that come out of Gan Eden, that you have the four drachim in Kabbalah, which is Pshat, Remesh, Sod, Drush, and he says that It's interesting. He says the Baal Shem Tov is Sod of the Sod, which is Lamaisa.
Yeah,
But
that is
just exactly along the lines of what you just said. The Zidichover said that the Rabbi Shimon was like a person that went to a faraway island, and he said there was this amazing bird over there. Then comes the Arizal, and he brought back a picture, a drawing of the bird, and then comes the Baal Shem Tov, and he brought the bird.
I love that. That was worth getting up this morning to hear. Beautiful. But what was it also? You said something today. What was it you said today that was very choshev? I mean, I'm sure you said lots of choshev things, but when we were learning?
Chassid Shota.
Chassid Shota. Oh, Chassid Shota. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so let's run forward a little bit. So the Indian of Kedusha is that it's bottle. What's the difference between bittul b'metzias and bittul yesh? Bittul yesh is giving up all my possessions. Bittul b'metzias is giving up that chelik of me that is able to own something. ולכן נקרא כוח מה, או in ברוך הוא מלובש בוי, ואינו דבר בפני עצמו. The Kedusha doesn't see itself as something separate. ולכן נקרא כוח מה, therefore it's called כוח מה, this is חוכמה. כוח מה, והוא ההפך ממש מבחינת הקליפה. It's the כוח of מה is מה אנחנו. That's like, what are we? Who am I? Like, what relevance am I? Yeah, והוא ההפך ממש מבחינת הקליפה וסitra achra. That's the opposite of klipa v'sitra achra. She'emen nishbos nefashos umos oilam, that come the umos oilam, the nefashos of the umos oilam, the avdin legamaihu. They are serving themselves. Remember, that can be very elevated. That doesn't mean they're just that's the union of self-actualization. Is also serving yourself. Yeah, but they say, give me, and feed me, like what Esav said. To be something unto themselves. And as we've said many times, Russia, one of the few definitions that Chazal give us, clear definition of Russia is a Yotzeis Atzmo min haklal. He takes himself out of the klal. The Russia is internally fragmented and he is externally isolated. He's in a difficult matzav. He really is. Canal. Hever is a chochma, which is the opposite of chochma. L'chein nikroim mesim. They're called dead. Ki a chochma tichya, because it's through chochma that we live. Meaning that they've it's like a limb of a body. Yeah, a limb of a body, kolzman, it's nichlal in the body. Yeah, it's alive. It has the life of the body pulsing through it. When the limb is cut off from the body, yeah, it's called mace. That's the Russia. He's cut off from the klal, so he's called mace. There's a few ways of understanding that, but that's how I understand it over here. Ki chochma tichya, kasiv yimosu v'lo b'chochma. They die without chochma, meaning it's like it's separated from the group. V'cheinu Rishayim v'poish Yisrael koidim shebo l'dei nisayin l'kadesh Hashem, and therefore the Rishayim and the ones, the sinners of Yisrael, before they come to a Nisayan and to be Makadosh Hashem, ki bechinas hachachma shel nefesh hakis im nitzas elakus mo'or ein so bocha melubish ba, that the chochma of the nefesh hakis and the spark of the Boyan Sholem himself, me'or ein so bocha, that comes mamash from Hashem, that is enclosed within the nefesh elakis. Remember, the nefesh elakis is a nivra. The essence of the nefesh elakis is a ne'etzel. It's important. It's a kli. The nefesh hakis is a kli. It's a perfectly transparent kli. It's kadosh, but it's still a nivra. Yeah. Whereas the essence of the essence of the neshama of the neshama is not a nivra. That's the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's a netzel. That's the Rebbeinu Shalom. Before they come to Israel, they're bechinas galus begufam. Benefesh Bahamis, Mitzada Klipa, Shabachal Smuli, that before the Yid gets put into this compromised position of having to give up his life to the Ribono Shel Olam, where everything is, where everything becomes crystal clear and the klipa dissolves, and all of a sudden that voice says that I am, that voice gets just dissolves. It gets burnt up in the face of kedusha, of the nitzitz elokus flaring up. Yeah, before that happens, the nefesh elokis is called in gullus within the goof and in the nefesh bahamis. Mitzad klipish b'chalis muli. Gullus means the inability to express yourself. Gullus is a disconnect between who you are and what you do. Like we said at Eliezer, like we said at your house on Motzi Shabbos, that Gullus, when a person is in Gullus, that means that their behavior is not aligned with who they are. They are not acting according to who they are. That's called Gullus. A man who is in Geula, a woman who is in Geula means that it means that their behavior and who they are perfectly aligned with one another. So when we are not acting as Yidden, that means the Nefesh Elokis is in Gullus. Why? Because the Nefesh Elokis just wants to do Torah mitzvahs. And the person's not doing Torah mitzvahs, so therefore the Nefesh Elokis is not being able to be who she's not able to do what she wants to do. That's called being in prison. That's the inyan of prison, is you can't do what you want to do. Yeah, and that's the inyan of Galus Shechina, that the world, which we could call, so to speak, Hashem's body, that the world should be running in accordance. Hashem's desire is Torah mitzvahs. So when the world is not running in accordance with Torah mitzvahs, that means Hashem is in Galus. It's like Hashem doesn't have shlita over his goof, because in his infinite another, he was meyached his malchus with Am Yisrael. Malchus is expression. So he so to speak, he handed his expression, his behavior over to Am Yisrael. So when we're acting godly, that is like Hashem going, feels so nice. When we're not doing Torah mitzvahs, we are holding Hashem, so to speak, in a Beit Soh, in a prison. That's Gullus. So when we are not acting in accordance with Torah mitzvahs, that's called the Nefesh Elokis being in Gullus. The Nefesh Bahamis isn't in Gullus in that point, but really Liba de Emes, the Nefesh Bahamis is in Gullus also. When a Yid is doing what the Nefesh Bahamis wants, why is that called Nefesh? Why is the Nefesh Bahamis? You would think, okay, I understand that the Nefesh, like we could think of it as a powerful horse and a beautiful princess. Yeah. So when the horse is being steered by the princess, then you would say the princess is in Geula and the horse is in Gullus. And when the horse is running the show and he's just schlepping the princess wherever he wants, yeah, you would say the princess is in Gullus and the horse is in Geula, yeah? But in fact, that's not the case. When the horse is being guided by the princess is in Bechinas Geula, and the horse is also Bechinas Geula. When the horse is doing what it wants, the princess is in Gullus and the horse is in Gullus. How do you explain that? It's the same reason why your kids need to have a bedtime. It's the same reason why your kids need you to make them brush their teeth. It's the same reason why your kids need to have a curfew. It's the same reason why when your emotions, when you're being overwhelmed by your emotions, you feel out of control, is that the nekeva, which is the emotions, they're looking upwards to be guided. Children are desperate for chinuch. They're looking to be guided. There's nothing worse than a kid who has no gedarim, no boundaries, nothing. For the kid, the kid feels out of control and the kid's beside themselves. They might not say that, but that's the Metzias. And that's the same with why the Nefesh Bahamis is in Gullus when when he's running the show, he's in Gullus. Because really he's desperate to actually be controlled by the Nefesh Elokis. And that's why such like difficult psychological and emotional issues crop up with the Rishoyim when they're mamash being dominated by their goof. Is the goof gets ill when they're getting dominated by the emotions get ill. The emotions are desperate to be contained and guided, just like children are desperate to be contained and guided. Yeah. So everyone loses. When the Nefesh of Bahamis is running the show, everyone loses. The Neshama's in Gullus, and he's also in Gullus. And when we're mamash being tzaddikim, yeah, the goof is mamash b'simcha rabba, the psyche is b'simcha rabba, the emotions are b'simcha rabba, everything is mamash in check. That's how it was created to be. So it's not how you would think that the Nefesh of Bahamis goes into Gullus when the Nefesh of Lakis is running the show. It's the opposite. The Nefesh of Bahamis is never as unhappy as when he's able to do what he wants. Funnily enough, ironically enough. It's good to know that. Chinas Gullus begufam, benefesh Bahamis mitzad akli, b'shebachal yasmulish, believe hamoileches and moisheles begufam, that's dominating over the body. B'yasoid Gullus hashchina. This is the inyan of Gullus hashchina. When we are not behaving correctly, when Am Yisrael is not behaving correctly, the Rebbeinu Shalom is in Gullus. That is what Gullus means. But so when we're all excited about the Rebbeinu Shalom, we're excited about Geula, yeah, the Geula Shlema, yeah, we can have Geula Shlema now, Mitzadenu. Geula means that you are acting, your behavior is aligned with your Nitzotz Yisrael. That's called Geula. That really is, and that's why there's the stories of the tzaddikim who used to have to. They would be asked if they heard the who was it, the tzaddik who he was asked if he heard the if it was the shofar, if Mashiach was coming, if it was the shofar, and he had to put his head out the window. He said, "Why? Why'd you put your head out the window?" He said, "Because in my house the shofar's blowing all the time." Everyone's heard that story, yeah. That's just the Metzias of the tzaddik. The tzaddik is in Geula. He's all upset because everybody else is going through tsaras. The world of the tzaddik is mamash givoldik, really givoldik. His tsar is looking at other people and he's like, don't you realize that? Like, why don't you just put it together? You're putting yourself through Gehenna. That's the definition of Gehenna. Definition of Gehenna is taking yourself seriously. And that is why this love is called this love that just wants the nature of the soul, like we said before, which is just wants to leave the wick and get his bato into the Aish, is called Ava Masuseres. Ki why? Ki he Masuseres Umachusa Belavush Sak the Klipa B'Poish Yisrael, because it is being contained within the thick, coarse walls of the Klipa of the Yidden who are not acting in accordance with their higher self. And it's through this that the Ruach Shtus is able to enter. We'll talk about more of that. We'll finish now. We'll talk about that next week. B'ezrat Hashem. Unless the Ruach Shtus enters into him. Basically, the most pasha, before we get all fancy with the identification and stuff like that, yeah, the most pasha pshat of Ruach Shtus means is that you forget who you are. You become momentarily insane, and you mistake yourself for the horse instead of the princess. That's the only way that it could happen that a Jew isn't acting in accordance with his Yiddishkeit, is that you became confused with your identity, got mixed up. You forgot who you were. Okay.
add a thing in here, just that when you're reading this last paragraph, it reminds me so deeply of a lot of these hostages that have come out recently that the shamas that they realized they were the princesses when they were in this deep gullah, but that dawned on them, and this inner strength and koach and kedusha came out, and there's just so much with it, with what's being said here that just reminds me of that, of how that klipa could be so strong, but then once that koach is tapped, it's a totally transformative experience, even in the middle of the deepest gullahs of the universe.
And we should leave the MS. We should know that we're being held hostages. We're all being held hostage. What is it? What was it? Really, let them home now. Is that what was that the slogan?
Bring them home now.
Bring them home now. Yeah, that's like Mashiach now. Mashiach now. They understand it isn't a request. It is a statement. Mashiach, the inyan of Mashiach is now. Imloi achshav emosai. Yeah, when you can let go of your false identification, which really is being bound up in all the thoughts of who you are and what you are and where you are and when you are, and you can be now. Yeah, that is the geula of the nefesh elokis. So the idea of being held hostage, we're mamash. We should be having machol. We should have our stick out and stuff. Bring them home now. In the Batei Midrashim and the Batei Knesios as well. There's a lot of people are being held hostage by by themselves, and that's the scariest prison of all, is the prison that you don't know you're in. That's the most terrifying of all prisons. I wrote 1 minute. I'm just going to read you something very quickly that I wrote. This is one of the seeds. The prison of the ego has no guards and no locks. Just a man too bound by his ideas to walk free. The prison of the ego has no guards and no locks. Just a man too bound by his ideas to walk free. That's really scary. Yeah. Okay, we should all be free. The hostages should be released. B'ezrat Hashem.
Amen.
The Rishoyim should disappear. And B'ezrat Hashem.
This is the Rambam says that
Amen.